Everybody, I have recently began to think about where I live on Long Island, and it occurred to me that a lot of people don't know that Long Island even exists. And it's funny to me because I always assumed that people knew about Long Island. It's the part of New York that's an island and it's shaped like a fish, but a lot of people don't know. And I didn't really realize that until I moved to England. And when I lived in England, people would ask me, oh, what part of the States are you from? And I would say I'm from New York, and they would assume that I lived in the city. Now, I'm originally from Queens, but I spent most of my life on Long Island. So when explaining that to people, they'd have to look it up on a map, and I thought that was really funny. And I assumed this was just a sort of international thing. People from other countries just had to be told about Long Island. No, there's more to New York than just Manhattan. No, it's not the case, because there are people that are from America that don't know about Long Island. And I thought it would be interesting to give you a little idea of what it's like kind of coming up as a goth on Long Island. Now, it's a little bit twofold because I really came up in Manhattan as well, and that's because of our proximity to Manhattan. And it's pretty conveniently located because on Long Island, depending upon what part of the island that you're from, if you live on the eastern end, which is by the fish's tail, or closer to the head, which is getting closer to Manhattan. Now, at the moment, I'm right in the middle, and so I'm about, I would say, an hour from Manhattan. So growing up here, you always had the benefit of being able to take a short train trip or get in the car with your friends and go to Manhattan, whether it be for a club, for shopping, or really for whatever. And you would get to enjoy the benefits of the city and then get in your car, come back home to a place where it was quieter, calmer, and you had trees and you had grass. Some people don't like that. They would prefer a more urban environment, but I kind of like the in-between. I like to be able to have a little bit of space. I like suburban areas because I don't like things that are too quiet, a little bit too desolate where nobody can hear you scream. I like civilization, but I also don't like it when it's too crowded and too claustrophobic. And the city in large doses can be a little bit claustrophobic for me. It never was that way for me when I was younger, but as I got older, it just got to be a little bit much. But it was, at the time, fantastic for us. So we really grew up with the best of both worlds. So Long Island, oftentimes we just chose to stay on the island to do things. Maybe there was nothing to do club-wise. Maybe we just wanted to stay local. One of our friends, their parents said, no, you can't go into the city, damn it, not tonight. And we would take one for the team and we'd stay local. So what are the things that we used to do, just being on Long Island? Well, just driving around in itself was such a massive bonding experience for us because we would get together in cars, and sometimes it would be multiple cars because there were so many of us, and we would listen to music. Somebody would have like a mixtape. Everyone had their mixtapes, and we would all bring ours, and we'd rotate them and listen to the different mixtapes. But it always seemed to revolve around a lot of 80s music. So you'd have The Cure, you'd have Psychedelic Furs, you'd have Depeche Mode, Erasure, Pet Shop Boys, Information Society, a lot of like the Smiths, Morrissey. So you'd have a lot of very emotional music, which tapped into a part of us that just made us very wistful and daydreamy. And we didn't really have to talk so much when we were driving. We would just have the music blasting and we would just listen. And we'd have the windows open and just sort of look out the window. And even though we didn't always have to converse, we didn't really need to. And these were such integral bonding situations for us, and we were all very close as a result of it. And when we did talk, holy shit, it was usually laughing our asses off about something, anything, and it would just set us off into fits of laughter, and it's still sort of inside jokes to this day. But I wanted to tell you some of the things that we used to do on Long Island, and I'm going to put links to some of this stuff in the description because some of this stuff exists online. So one of those things happens to be Mary's grave, and Mary's grave existed in Stony Brook. It's still there, but it's not what it seems. It's not actually a grave. It's a house. In this house, it is in sort of an affluent area, and it's a very old Victorian home, and it is a pain in the ass to get to. You have to go through these winding roads, and I don't know how we found it. I don't know how I still remember to get to it to this day, but nobody pretty much forgot how to get to this house. So you're going through these narrow winding roads, and there's no street lights. We always went at nighttime, and whenever you would see all of a sudden, boom, in the distance, car lights ahead of us, we'd like scream and freak out. As if the drive there wasn't scary enough with its dark winding roads. It's all desolate. There's no street lights. There's woods on either side of you, and you just see random eyeballs lighting up from the wildlife on the side of the road. And we had to be extra about it. So of course, what do? We tell ghost stories, and we're really trying to get into that mode, and it worked. So as we're driving, I remember this one time, I'm sitting next to my ex, and I can't remember who's in the front seat in front of him. My ex was sat right next to the passenger window, and as we're driving, he's telling a ghost story, and he's visibly freaked out. And he's trying to kind of play it off as if he isn't, but it's freaking obvious. And of course, you shine the light on yourself as victim, you're going to get the crap scared out of you. Somebody's gonna fucking focus on you, and they are going to freak you out, which you did. So whoever's in the front seat, I forget who it was, he stuck his arm out the window as my ex was telling the story, and he, bam, slaps the side of his window so hard. He screams, throws his Pepsi all over the place. All over, everybody in the back seat was covered. It was on the ceiling, it was on the back window. We were laughing our asses off, except the driver. But then, of course, we weren't laughing in the end because we were all sticky and covered in used Pepsi. So, we're going through, and you'd come upon this house. At the top of a hill, it was an old Victorian, and it was massive, it was beautiful. And that was Mary's house. So, legend has it, and I hope that I get this right. Legend has it that Mary's husband had gone off to war, and she had waited for him up in a window every day to return. They exchanged letters, and one day the letters stopped. And she was worried sick about him and hadn't received word and had been waiting for him to return home, but he never did. So in the top left corner, the highest point of the house, is where she would sit and wait for him, because I suppose that's where you get the best vantage point, where you get the best view, because since you're up on a hill and looking downward, you'd see anybody who's coming. So she would stay there, and when we'd go to the home, that fucking silhouette was still in the window, and it scared the crap out of us. Ask anybody who went there back in the 90s, and they saw it. So when you go up to this house, any light in the house, if it happened to have been on at the time, if it wasn't too late, the light was your typical fluorescent light. But that light in the top left corner of the home, it glowed a different color. It glowed an almost orange color, and you could see her in the window, clear as day. It was the silhouette of what looked to be a Victorian woman. She had her hair up in a bun, profile, high neckline of a dress, and you could see her in the frickin' window. We would go by slowly, and I don't know what we expected to happen, but we would just go to see Mary in the window. And that home, from what I understand, has exchanged hands many times, so it's been under different ownership. And ever since, I guess, I want to say the mid-2000s, the light's not on in that window anymore, and it was on for years, but now the light's off. So this one is kind of bad because it was illegal, but I'm pretty sure that the statute of limitations had run out on that because, one, I was a minor, two, it was over 20 years ago, so... Anyway, we would break into the psychiatric center that was abandoned, and it was a pretty screwed up story from what I understand, because it was a fully functional, massive psychiatric center, and they just shut down and let everyone go. And that was really it. Everybody who didn't have family to claim them or anywhere else to go, they just, boop, bye, happy trails, which is really sad, but at the time, I don't think we really knew the full story. We just knew that it was an abandoned psychiatric center. So we had to do this in order to break in. We had to do it sort of like Mission Impossible style, because even though it was abandoned, there were still guards that would watch this place. And they were in a tower, and there was a light that went around. And we would have to beat the light. So we would park a little bit of a distance away, and we would go in groups, and we would break off into smaller groups. So the light would come around, small group would run, boom, we'd hide behind this bush. Okay, we're there. So we would have our next move, which would be to go behind this one corner next time the light came around. And the group behind us would go to the bush that we just were. So the light would come around, here we are behind the corner, next group behind the bush. And the objective was to make it to this one basement window that was broken. And then we'd climb in through that basement window, and we would be inside the psychiatric ward. And you had to have your flashlight with you in order to be able to see. It's the 90s. We don't have cell phones. We don't have the flashlight on our phone. So we made sure we had to have like flashlights. Sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we just had to sort of get through by sheer instinct. And I don't know how we did it. It was scary in there. You would find rooms with beds and chains in them. There were like tunnels that connected from one building to another area. And I don't want to blow up anybody's spot, but nowadays they still apparently break into the psychiatric center and they make it all the way up to the roof. I never made it up to the roof, my friends did, but there were always tons of files lying around. And I remember I took some files home because I was interested in reading it. Massive breach in HIPAA laws, but I think that's more on their end because they're supposed to keep that confidential, and I wasn't a medical professional at the time. But I remember seeing these reports on people who were patients at the hospital and just things that had gone on, like this person fell in the shower, this person had this sort of incident, and it was a creepy place, and anything could have happened to us in there. I mean, here we are, we're teenagers, we're underground, nobody can hear us, the guards don't know we're there. There could have been like serial killers in there could have been anything that could have happened to us, but it didn't. Next we had Mount Misery Road and Sweet Hollow Road, and these roads weren't exactly so long, but we would go there because these roads were considered to be haunted. And there's so many different stories surrounding both of these roads. Like there was a mental asylum apparently was located there in the 1700s and had burned down, killing hundreds. And then there was also stories of, I believe, Native American tribes had considered that land sacred, and Westerners, we weren't allowed on that land. And there's a ghost of a woman who's meant to see walking up and down that road in ghostly white robes. And it was a creepy road nonetheless. And it said if you put the car in neutral and just let it sit, that your car is meant to be pushed. And I don't remember, we never tried it. I don't think that we had enough balls to try that, but that's another thing that we used to do. So it was a lot of things involving paranormal and just dangerous stuff how am I still alive? It's not exactly a very PC term because, in the 90s we didn't really give much of a crap for things that were politically correct. Either that or we were teenagers and didn't really, it didn't register, but it was a place that was referred to as Midgetville. And the thing about Midgetville, it was in Oakdale, is that it's a small artist colony. We didn't know it was an artist colony at the time. We just thought it was this random weird area. And you had to get in and out through these sort of stone arcs. And they were attached to these old stone buildings. It's a really old historic area, but the homes themselves, once you got in, were very small and recessed into the ground, and it almost looked like sort of hobbits lived there. I'll put a link down below or see if I can find any pictures online that I could show you and show some links. But it's a really beautiful place. However, when you pass through to get in and out and you see these stone arcs that you have to get through, you see that there's a platform, but the platform has been covered for some reason underneath. There's just a big square that's been cut out and plywood has been put in its place. And the reason is it said that people were hung there. So everything we did seemed to have a very morbid, dark theme, so I guess it really was gothic things to do on Long Island. Next thing we had was Satan's Trails, and this also was far east on Long Island, and when you go further east, there's a lot less going on out there, so there's not really much there as far as just forest, random houses, random stores. It's just sort of, further east you go, the more desolate things really get, and this was a little bit far out east. And Satan's Trails was said to be out sort of in the middle of the woods. You needed to go onto dirt roads to get there. And I don't know what we expected to see when we got there. We didn't know much about Satanists or anything like that. We assumed that they were like these people who worship the devil, sacrificed chickens, and drew pentagrams and everything. So we didn't know. All we knew was it was supposed to be scary and we wanted to go there. And we went there stupidly with 3 carloads of people on a narrow road that you cannot turn around on. You can only hit reverse. So we go. We are in the first car. And we have 2 cars behind us. We go, and here we find one trailer. And darting out from behind the trailer is this big, crazy, fat guy with a fucking rifle pointed at us, screaming, and we lost it. My friend Nick screamed, "I'm so scared," and bit my friend Elena's leg. This poor kid was an exchange student from Australia, and here we have him in Satan's Trails. Everybody's screaming, and finally the people in the back, 2 cars back, get the message, you need to go in reverse as fast as humanly possible. They did, second car did, and I don't know how we did it, but we managed to do a U-turn around a freaking tree and get out of there. Never forget this. It was the scariest crap ever. We never went back for obvious freaking reasons. The Witch's Brew was another one of our favorite haunts, and I did a mini vlog about it, and I really suggest checking it out. Now, back then, they didn't have quite as much of a selection of things that they do now, but it was really the aesthetic and the environment that brought us in, and it was just, it had that gothic theme that we really just, it was nice to just be around other people and just in this environment, and it was just really conducive to being creative and talking and bonding with everybody, and it was cool. It was a fun time. But definitely check out that vlog. I'll put a link to that in the description below. At the end of the night, we always managed to somehow end up at a diner, and this is back when I was a bad girl. I used to smoke. Not proud of it, but I used to be a smoker, and I'm not a reformed smoker, so I'm not going to tell people don't smoke, it's bad for you, but I was a smoker, and as a hypochondriac, it's something that I look back on. I'm like, damn it, why did I do that? But I digress. We used to always end up at a diner, and we would be in a massive group of people. So they would have to push together 3 tables, and we would drink coffee by the gallon. I don't know how we managed to survive on this much coffee. And I think about it now, and being of such a nervous disposition, which my anxiety didn't really kick in until about like my mid-20s. So at the time I was okay. But we would drink coffee by the gallon, and the amount of sugar that we would put in this coffee was obscene. So I don't know if it's because we really didn't like the taste of coffee. I can't remember, but all I know was it was the norm to put as much milk and sugar in your coffee as humanly possible, and that's what we did. So we'd be chain smoking, drinking coffee, and we would have piles of French fries. Everybody would order like, massive orders of French fries. So we would just be eating all of these French fries. Sometimes we get it with gravy. French fries with gravy, really good. I don't know if that's a Long Island thing. I'm curious, is French fries and gravy a thing like anywhere else? But here on Long Island, French fries and gravy, super good. You gotta try it. But some with French fries and gravy, some people get French fries with mozzarella on it. I'm hungry. As I reminisce about all of these times that we'd had as friends, everything that we did together, we weren't on the phone, we weren't texting, we weren't sending emails, we weren't on social media, we were together. And that in itself was so important, and it made me think about a lot of the questions that you'd ask me when I was fielding questions for my Q&A, and I apologize I didn't get to all of them, but some of you had made reference to the magic that I talk about, and other people who are around that time talk about as well. Will the magic ever come back? Will the scene ever be what it was in the 80s and 90s? And you really long for that sort of magic and that, just that emotional connection to everything. And what I think it's important that you realize is that the magic isn't in places, it's in us. The magic is something that you and I bring to the table. So what I recommend, and I know I said this in my last video, is that if you really want that magic and you crave it, you need to have that sort of collective elation. You need to be together and have fun. And you can create the magic anywhere. When we were driving around in cars, listening to music, that magic was present. And it wasn't because it was the 90s, it was because we created it. And it sounds so cheesy when I say the magic is real. I sound like, you know, talking about like a Disney movie or something, but I hope you can look past the cheesy aspect of it. But that being said, if you want that feeling, you want to create that atmosphere, you got to bring it yourself. So if you show up and you're positive and you're amped, you're happy, you're excited, and you're having a good time, and so are your friends, there it is. That sort of thing is contagious. And once you spread it to the entire room, boom, you've made your magic. I hope you enjoyed this nostalgia trip with my friends and I. There are times that we definitely cherished, and some stories, as cheesy as they are, sometimes they just have to be told, and I'm randomly craving gravy fries. Gee, I wonder why. But until next time, bye. I know what I'm doing with my hands. Bye.